The harmonization of rubber and armored hockey, that is Gear 4 Luffy. And Bound Man Gear 4 Luffy has a tremendous amount of durability and defenses compared to, let's say, his base form. Where in his base form, he could handle even giant attacks like the Shadows Asgard punch that Gekomoria did to shatter a section or the entire island of the Thriller Bark ship, and yet Luffy could walk away from that with virtually no damage because Luffy is rubber. However, when it comes to cutting attacks, these could still hurt him, and armored hockey hardening was a way to avoid damage from cutting attacks. But Doflamingo was able to cut through Luffy's armored hockey in base form with the Athlete Thread, and that same attack he used on Gear 4 Boundman Luffy had no damage. The cutting attack, the Athlete Thread, and Doflamingo was known for his cutting attacks. He was able to withstand that because the armored hockey hardening was still rubbery. That is the harmonization of rubber and armored hockey. However, Luffy, from then on, was starting to deal with opponents that were able to bypass even the defensive power of Boundman. First, we saw Cracker being able to cut through his arm, and then we have Katakuri. With a Peerless or Unstoppable Donut, he was able to devastate Luffy with some very big damage with one of those punches. And from then on, Katakuri was the only person to do substantial damage to Gear 4 Boundman Luffy until Yonko Kaido comes into the picture. In chapter 923 of One Piece, after Luffy delivers devastating blows to Kaido, Kaido gets up, sighs, and then proceeds to speed blitz Luffy and hits him with an attack called Thunder Bagua, a named attack, but nonetheless one attack. And that one attack shook a lot of people, especially folks that believed that Luffy could actually tango with Yonko Kaido at that point in time. And Luffy, who he recognized to be a monster, was shown that he was a frog in a puddle compared to the ocean that is Kaido. And keep in mind, Kaido is one of the few characters that is in the top tier. The strongest creature in the world. Someone that Big Mom recognized as being a very dangerous threat. Somebody that has ties to Whitebeard and Shanks. A lot of folks will put him as being the strongest character in the entire verse of One Piece. That is Yonko Kaido. But it got a lot of folks thinking, if Kaido can do this to Luffy in Boundman, and previously we saw how Boundman did no damage to Big Mom in Whole Cake Island, is there anybody else that could one-shot Gear 4 Boundman Luffy? And here we get into the Admirals. Because some folks believe that the Admirals are just as strong as the Yonko. Okay, alright, that's their opinion, and they're allowed to it. So in this situation, what we're going to try and do is replicate the Kaido and Luffy situation with the Admirals. So in this case, Luffy is in Gear 4 Boundman, and he's combat ready. When Luffy saw Kaido get up, he was shocked, but it wasn't like he wasn't combat ready. Like, here's a free shot, Kaido. No, Kaido just took the free shot. And we're going to be focusing primarily on the named attacks of the Admirals. Primarily. Some attacks are not necessarily named, but at the same time, these attacks are fairly potent and used often by said Admiral. In this case, it's the named attacks we'll be focusing on for the most part when it comes to this video. Just how Kaido's attack they used against Luffy was a named attack. So, Admirals. Let's go step by step here. Aokiji, Kuzan, Fujitora, and then finally, Akainu. Of course, for this video, we can't use Green Bull, because Green Bull, we have no idea what he's rocking. So, number one, Aokiji, the blue pheasant. Yeah. Now, Aokiji, for the sake of this video, will not be using Ice Age and will not be using the Ice Saber, because the Ice Age is only used in water, per se, like bodies of water. And the Ice Saber, if he uses it, tries to form it. Again, Luffy for this video is combat ready. So there's a very small window here in getting the actual shot in on Luffy. The Ice Saber, it takes too much time. And then plus he has to find certain debris or some of that sort to make the saber in the first place. So no Ice Saber. However, there is one thing that we have to know, and I would say it's very important for this Aokiji section. Recall Buffalo and Punk Hazard. Buffalo stated when he saw Doflamingo get frozen over, and he saw him break out of Aokiji's ice, he was very thrilled to see that he did not get frozen to the bone. Apparently, getting frozen to the bone is when you're essentially near death or actually dead when it comes to Aokiji's freezing. And that's the main way he'll try and do this, by freezing. He does have some physical-based attacks, true, but mainly it's freezing. So if we take Buffalo's words to heart, if Luffy doesn't get frozen to the bone, then he probably won't get one-shotted. So, is it possible for Aokiji to freeze Luffy to the bone in Boundman Luffy's state? Now, the two freezing techniques I would say can't do it are the Ice Time Capsule, which I think he used against Doflamingo Punk Hazard, but we know for sure it's when he used against Saul back in the Nico Robin flashback. And the reason I'd say Doflamingo probably experienced that too in Punk Hazard is because Aokiji is way more powerful in Punk Hazard compared to when he was during the Nico Robin flashback. That was years ago. Number two is the Ice Ball. So the Ice Ball and the Ice Time Capsule, I don't think would freeze Luffy to the bone. I don't think so at all. Because Doflamingo could break out of that if that's the same technique, number one. But then number two, Armored Haki hardening is, let's say, a layer of protection that Luffy has around his body. Not all of his body, but most of his body, but a lot of his body in Gear 4 Boundman. And his strength already ups tremendously. A good reference, I think, is comparing, let's say, Boundman to Diamond Jozu. Diamond Jozu, as far as we know, keywords right there, but as far as you know, could not break out of the strings of Doflamingo, but Boundman could. Jozu himself, even though he was caught off guard, he was frozen over by Aokiji. And in that case, when he did freeze over Diamond Jozu's arm, as far as we know, number one, he was using Armor Haki, and then number two, he only froze that one arm of Diamond Jozu, not his whole body. So he's not a vibration human like Whitebeard. And again, we're not too sure if it was the Ice Time Capsule against Doflamingo Punk Hazard, but at the same time, Luffy's strength and his already enhanced durability and defense because of Armor Haki hardening, coating his body, I would say would prevent him from getting frozen to the bone completely by Aokiji. However, there is the Ice Time. Ice Time. And that is direct physical contact with the person.
Now it's Ice Time.
We saw Luffy back in the day. We saw it against Nico Robin back in the day as well. It's almost like a higher degree of, let's say, cryostasis, something like that, where they're alive, yes, but for only a short period of time. And if not for Chopper's quick thinking and thawing the body and so on, they would have died. But Ice Time does take a period of time, like only a few seconds, but it does take a certain degree of time. The Ice Time maybe could completely freeze Luffy over in Gear 4 Boundman, but in this case, Luffy is combat ready. I don't think Luffy's gonna just sit there and be frozen over. Honestly, I would say he breaks out. I would say he breaks out just completely. Even though Ice Time is good, considering Luffy back then, and comparing that Luffy after post-Davy back fight to Luffy in the middle of Dressrosa in Gear 4 Boundman, no. Like, there's no comparison there. Honestly, there isn't. Leagues, worlds more powerful. The strength is off the charts. The defense is off the charts. I don't think freezing Luffy works. I really do not see it happening. I would say no on the freezing. I think he busts out of that, even if it's Ice Time. From then we have Ice Block Partisan and then the Ice Block Pheasant Beak. Good attacks, but ultimately to actually one-shot a Boundman, considering again how he could take the attacks of Doflamingo and then Katakuri. Characters who I would say, when it comes from a strength standpoint or a DC standpoint, are far more potent than Ace. Ace in general, honestly. And Ace was able to counter a Pheasant Beak attack with his own heat attack. So I don't think a Pheasant Beak or I don't think a Partisan could actually one-shot Luffy. I do not. Now, from Aokiji, who I would say cannot one-shot Gear 4 Boundman Luffy, we now move on to Kizaru. For him, it's about speed, because speed is weight. According to him, he kicks at the speed of light, and many of his attacks are light-based and light-oriented. But for this video, no Amaterasu, which is the thing he uses when he Amaterasu, where he blinds you when he has the fingers in your eyes. That's his Amaterasu. Okay, whatever. It is what it is there. And no Ama no Murakumo, which is his version of the sword. He forms the light sword, that kind of stuff. Again, that's all well and good. It's much quicker than, let's say, a ice saber that Aokiji forms. But again, Luffy is combat ready. So just like with Aokiji, these instantaneous attacks and the almost instantaneous attacks are what we're going to focus on here for this video, rather than things like swords and him forming some of that. You can maybe make the argument, well, okay, well, if you form the swords quick enough and then you can stab Luffy in the face or something like that. But that is far more inconsistent, I would say, compared to the rest of the attacks that Aokiji and Kizaru have at their disposal, for, of course, one-shot purposes. But we do have two named attacks for Kizaru. So number one is the movement technique called the Yato no Kagami, and then after that, the kicks from that, or any light speed based kicks. Some folks argue that he only kicks at the speed of light after that technique. Whatever. I would say he does it anytime he wants to, honestly, but it is what is there. Light speed based kicks, Yato no Kagami and or otherwise. Can they one-shot Luffy? They're devastating. We see what happens to the mangroves, and the mangroves are huge. They house normally cities or towns at their roots. And for argument's sake, let's just say that the laser version of the kick and the kick itself have the same degree of potency. Maybe the laser kick is a bit more potent, maybe the kick itself is a bit more potent. The thing here is, like, for example, with Zoro, he was charging up a kick of some kind against Zoro, whether it was going to be a direct contact kick or a laser kick, we're not too sure, because we see the end result of the kick after really deflects it, and it winds up being like a wave or laser sort of kick. So essentially speaking, you can make the argument where the potency of the kicks are the same for both the laser and the actual direct contact kick. At least that's what I would say, because that is kind of hard to gauge. The same variation in power also applies to his finger lasers as well, because his finger lasers, they tend to be weaker or stronger depending how much charge time he has, and because Luffy's already combat ready, if he's going to fire the laser, it would have to be relatively quickly in the situation. At the end of the day, the finger lasers, I would say, just in general, won't do the job when it comes to one-shotting Luffy. Whether they could penetrate Luffy or not with his arm and haki coating and Bowman, that's a debate in of itself, and I would rather focus on the attacks that appear to be more powerful, which are the kicks. But considering how, in pre-time skip, Luffy took a kick from Kizaru already, no. That kick may not have been as powerful as, let's say, the other kicks we've seen from Kizaru do. Like, maybe that wasn't a true light speed kick. Alright, whatever, fine. But how much more are we willing to go when it comes to Kizaru's kicks, Yato no Kagami and otherwise? In fact, none of his kicks knocked out any of the supernova. Apu was not knocked out. He was still conscious. He just got throttled. The same for Drake, the same for, just go through the ringer. Drake, Uroge, Apu were not knocked out from Kizaru's kick. I don't see Kizaru with his light speed kicks, Yato no Kagami and / or otherwise, I don't see him knocking out, one-shotting a Gear 4 Bowman Luffy. Number 2 for Kizaru, the Yasakani no Magatama.
Yasakani Sacred Jewels. It's too bright.
Oh, for this case will be the focus version, which he did on Marco, because he can change the spread of the attack. At the end of Marineford, after Aokiji's Ice Age, he did the same technique to pretty much destroy the entire ice sheet that Aokiji made to try and take out Luffy when he was on Lost Submarine. But for this case, it's gonna be the same thing that he used against Marco. And that is a very devastating attack. But to make the parallel of Marco and, let's say, Luffy, or let's say Marco Katakuri and Luffy, right? If Luffy, at this point in time in Wano Kuni, depending on how you see him, if he's somewhere around 2nd or 1st command level, or even stronger than that, then it would only make sense for his capabilities to follow suit. Now, I'm not saying that he's like Marco's. Marco, he took the damage, and we see him take the damage, and he recovers from that damage. Very fair. But he still takes the damage nonetheless.
Marco!
So you could argue that Marco, when he took that damage initially, was still active. So depending on how you see Luffy currently in the story, you can make a parallel there and say, okay, if Marco could take the damage and still be active from a Yasukai no Magatama, then potentially Luffy could do the same thing if he's around that level. If he's around that level in your mind. That depends on how you perceive Luffy. I would say from a durability standpoint, he's probably better than Marco from a durability standpoint, but Marco just can recover. That's the main thing here. Marco will take the damage, but he can actually recover from all wounds. He's the Phoenix. Whereas Luffy just has that innate durability with the armor haki and rubber merger. So the attack will hit Luffy, yes, but I don't see actually knocking out, especially considering how it's a consistent barrage of attacks, where I would say you're more likely to one-shot somebody, in this case, with a massive, just devastating one blow, compared to a barrage of attacks, because each of the attacks individually won't have that much power if they were, let's say, compared to a collective of said attacks. He'll take the Yasukai no Magatama, I think, for a period of, let's say, a few seconds, but then he'll ultimately block it. Or he'll raise armor haki hardening around that part of his body to defend against that, because again, he's combat ready. So things that would take necessarily more time to do more damage, he could probably block mid-attack or defend mid-attack some way, somehow. And it kind of goes on the same issue as the ice time, where the ice time itself, it's good, and it may freeze Luffy to the bone, but it takes too much time considering a combat-ready Luffy. There's too many factors there to say, unless Luffy is sitting down, twiddling his thumbs in Gear 4, and it's a complete free, 10 seconds, try to do something. No, I don't see the Yasukai no Magatama being able to one-shot Luffy in Bound Man. I just don't see it. The next person, Fujitora. Now, when it comes to attacks of focus, I was going to omit the meteors, because the meteors, they take too much time. He has to make the Zushi rings to go up into space, and then he has to pull an asteroid to make a meteor that has to come down, and so on and so forth. It just takes too much time for a combat-ready Luffy. Again, the window here is a very small window to get a free shot on Luffy. However, I do want to have a stipulation on whether or not Luffy could get one-shotted by a meteor. Let's say Fujitora summoned it in advance, and he made an opening, or he created an opening to where Luffy, he's gonna take this meteor head on. So in this case, could Luffy get knocked out, one-shotted by the meteor? Could he face tank a meteor? Yes. Yes. I would say without question. We have not seen Fujitora use armor haki hardening. This would be crazy. This would be wild. Armor haki hardening on an inbound meteor.
What?
Oh, if you could do that, then damn. But no.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
The meteor itself has no haki on it, so it's a physical rock coming down. Guess what? Luffy, rubber. Done. It'll hurt him because of the heat. In theory, Luffy could fall 10k and be fine because, well, he's rubber. Consider how, for example, in Marineford, they're falling down from the ship and they're on top of the giant tsunami. They're falling down and Luffy says, oh wait, I'll be fine, I'm rubber. Dude, what the hell? Like, come on, what's wrong with you? Like, what about the rest of us? We're all gonna die. That kind of stuff. Again, Luffy took a island shattering punch from, or a pseudo island shattering punch from Gecko Moria and was fine because he's rubber. Those type of attacks don't really work on Luffy because Luffy is rubber. So the meteorite, you can say in of itself, will do some damage to Luffy. Maybe put on top of that, harmonized with armor haki hardening. No. The next thing, the gravito blades. So these gravity-based attacks, devastating, very devastating. They warp and change gravity in various ways, which of course the main thing here is the Gravito Moko, the Raging Tiger, which was like the horizontal gravity wave against Luffy. It missed Luffy, but it was able to shatter a giant Dressrosa rock behind Luffy. But either way, the gravity blade he used against Sabo, I think, on various occasions. Basically, it's what he uses on a regular basis when we see him in Dressrosa. It includes some of the tunnel stuff, but that is something called, and that's the last part, the Jigoku Tabi, the trip to hell. All those attacks Whether it's the Raging Tiger, whether it's the Jigoku Tabi, the trip to hell with the tunnel, which Zoro was able to take and not get knocked out from. All those things I don't see knocking out one-shotting Gear 4 Bound Man Luffy. Not from the Raging Tiger, I would say. He does warp gravity, but then you see how much damage it does, and the damage itself is pretty impressive, but is it enough to actually one-shot a Gear 4 Bound Man Luffy? I would argue no. I would definitely argue no. And then finally, the last person on the list, Akainu. Current Fleet Admiral Akainu, or pre-time skip Akainu, given how we only know his named attacks from then. And for this, we're not going to be using the Ryusei Kazan. Best leave it alone. Not necessarily a big deal. It covers a massive surface area, massive area. Best not use that attack when it comes to Luffy. And according to Oda himself, Akainu is rocking some of the highest DC in the verse, according to Oda himself. But, go down the list here. 3 attacks. Number 1, like the main one, alright? The Daifunka, the Great Eruption, which maybe, but I don't think so. I don't think so. It's impressive considering how the attack is the magma version, Akainu's version of Ace's Fire Fist or Luffy's Giant Pistol or something of that sort. And you can also say that he used a smaller version of that against Ace when they clashed after he convinced Ace to turn around and attack him. But at the same time, the Daifuka, I think the main things to worry about here, the most threatening thing isn't necessarily the force of the attack, but the heat of the attack. The force is impressive, but at the same time, what was really noted was the heat of the attack, and how the heat could completely evaporate the giant iceberg. The same thing with Ace, where it was the heat that was the most important thing. He was superior from a temperature standpoint than Ace was, so Ace got burned. On top of that, we do know that he can subdue some of the attacks of Whitebeard, but for the sake of the magma fist itself, for the sake of the Great Eruption itself, and what we've seen of it so far, the main thing here is the heat, though the force is impressive. That's what I'd argue. So yes, I think it will do damage to Luffy and Bound Man, a good amount of damage, but I don't see actually knocking Luffy out in the same way that Kaido could just speed blitz and devastate Luffy one shot. I don't think so. Number 2, the Inugami Guren, or the Hound Blaze. So once again, this kind of comes down to the comparison of where you see Luffy power-wise in Gear 4, and then compare him to, let's say, the first division commanders of crews, whether it's Katakuri, whether it's Marco. It depends on how you perceive Luffy's strength compared to people like them. And like I said before, I think that Luffy is kind of around like a low admiral-ish level, at least when it comes to raw physical power in Bound Man. But the reason why I make this comparison is because we did see Marco pretty much just tank the entire Inugami Guren. And again, for him, yes, he recovers his wounds almost instantly, but it wasn't enough force or damage initially to knock out someone like Marco. It's more so just a giant magma wave in the shape of a dog. Essentially, that's all just semantics, but let's flip it around for a second. Let's say Marco was in Luffy's position in Wano Kuni facing down Kaido, and Kaido does a Thunder Bagua against Marco. I would say there's a good chance that Marco gets one-shotted and gets knocked out just like Luffy did. Even though Marco is the Phoenix, the amount of damage that Kaido seems to be able to generate, not only that, but how fast Kaido moves too, when he does the Thunder Bagua, just seems to be off the charts. And in a general sense, I would say that the Yonko are superior, potentially vastly superior in combat than the Admirals themselves, but that's my take. That's how I view the Yonko. And I do understand that there's a theory out there that Kaido's club is actually Kairoseki or something of that sort, like as a Kairoseki tip. Maybe, it's possible. But until that's confirmed, I'm not going to say that it is, and we'll save that topic for another day if that day ever arrives. And then finally, the last one, Meigo, Hellhound. I can see it. I can see it. The Meigo in the anime, it's what he uses to make another hole inside of Whitebeard's body. But in the manga, he blows off half of Whitebeard's face. The heat and the force of the Meigo, that claw-based attack, seem to be on a whole new... It's like a condensed, more powerful and faster Daifuka. If Luffy was tagged by that, even though there's armor haki hardening, I can see it potentially. Like, for me, I would say right now, it's more of like a 60% that Luffy is not knocked out, but a 40% chance that Akainu could knock him out with that singular attack. It has the speed, considering how Whitebeard himself could barely dodge to the point where, again, half his face blew off, and then we see the damage itself from that. Yeah, okay, I think that's the only attack that has a reasonable chance, but the chance is still not in Akainu's favor. That's what I would say at the end of the day. Kuzan, Aokiji, no. Kizaru, Borsalino, no. Fujitora, Isho, no. But Sakazuki, Akainu, there is potentially one named attack so far that he has that might be able to get the job done. That's my stance on this topic at hand. Let me know where you stand, and I'm gonna catch you guys and gals later. Be sure to rate the video. It is not that hard to do. I guarantee you that, because I know that you all have a device called Zamaosu. You use Zamaosu to click, rate the video, to click, subscribe, to click on that bell to join the squad. And of course, as always, feel free to please do comment in the comment section down below. Once again, let me know where you stand on this topic at hand. Peace, and have a nice goddamn day.